The video you are about to watch is from an old woodworking magazine that I published during the years of 2003 to approximately 2006. This was a very unique magazine. It was purely video content and it was distributed on DVDs. The magazine ran for approximately 3.5 years, and then due to financial concerns, we simply had to terminate the magazine. We moved on to other things over the last roughly 15 years. However, there has been a request to resurrect this content, so I've gone through the trouble to get the equipment, the products, everything I needed in order to bring this content back to life to share with everyone. Here on this YouTube channel, we'll be putting up approximately 100 to 120 of the original stories that appeared in that magazine. The magazine was called Woodworking at Home Magazine, and it was truly one of a kind in the world. I really hope you enjoy these videos, and please tell your friends about them.
Welcome to What a Relief. I am Dave Reilly. In the last issue, we have the start of an armoire project, and on the doors of the project there are two diamond-shaped accents. They're to be done in walnut, and it occurred to me that this would be a nice place for a small, fairly simple carving. Now here's the carving. You see it's the same shape as the one that is going to be on the armoire. This is in walnut. It's going to be 1/4 of an inch thick. It's a fairly straightforward, fairly simple design, and I think you're going to enjoy doing it. Now here's the pattern all cut out. What I've done here is to give ourselves a 1/8 inch relief on the side of the carving. I've cut away with a table saw. It helps to establish a reference plane for the background, and I think it'll make things a lot easier. As we've done on the other projects, we've glued it down to a backing board with the newspaper in between. Before we get started, I want to mention something about lighting. You notice I have here a floodlight to give myself some cross lighting. Lighting is very important. If you have very soft fluorescent lighting or somewhat similar, the detail in a relief carving is very, very difficult to see. So I always suggest some flexible light that you can have from the side. It'll give you a lot of contrast. All right, the first thing we're going to do is to start to outline the carving. We use a V tool and just start cutting around it. This will define it. Pay attention to your grain because you don't want to get any chip outs. This forms essentially what we would be calling a stop cut. You notice as I'm doing this how I support my hand. My arm is resting on the wood. My hand is holding the chisel or the V-tool firmly, and I just guide it with my hand. In fact, there's a bit of body motion involved here. This is one of the reasons why I recommend you stand when you're doing this type of carving, because of you can swing your body, follow curves. It's much more difficult to do that while you're seated. Now we can start removing some of that background. Working on in. I'm using a number 7 gouge now, just to waste away this wood up to this stop cut. When you're doing this type of removing your background, it's a good idea, if you can, to go across the grain. It cuts away very cleanly. If you have any twisting grain, you're less likely to get caught in it. As you can see here, it just chops away very nicely. And we start and take a flatter gouge and cutting away along the outline of our curve. I don't go right up to the line at this time. I leave a very small amount of space so that when the final adjustment comes, then I can come right up to the line and get my final points. One thing you notice that the board that I have this mounted on is square, because sometimes you have to do a lot of switching around. So why not have a square one so you don't have to adjust your vise all the time? It's just a little quick, easy way of taking care of it. Now here I'm coming up to my final depth, and I'm using this area here that was sawn away previously as my reference point. So that makes life a little bit easier. I can just start and skim right in from there, knowing that that's the depth that I'm going to be dealing with. Now getting into these very narrow areas can be a bit of a challenge. What I do after I have cut away from the side to form a stop cut, you can come in with this is a 5mm number 2 gouge, and you can start and lift some of that material out. So it'll separate where you have formed the stop cuts. But that still hasn't solved your problem for the very, very narrow. So here I'm using a number 2 skew chisel. And sliced right down into that corner. And it'll get you in even further. But unless you're very lucky, you'll never have a tool that is perfect for that joint or that corner. So what we do is we just chop down, forming a fairly deep stop cut in both areas here. And then with a very narrow, I like a very narrow number 2 chisel. It's a 2mm. And you can just keep working your way in to separate all the fibers. Time to time you have to go back, get that edge so that all of these fibers are cleanly cut. You don't want to have to tear things out. It doesn't do you any good. You want to get a nice clean cut, and out she comes. To get the proper depth for your background, a very simple tool, a little depth gauge. It's simply a block of wood with a wood screw in it, sticking out, in this case, 1/8 of an inch. And then you can just move it over your project using your top surface as your reference. And wherever it touches, like in here, that means I still have a little bit way to go. And it's just a matter of just get in there, take that final amount off, and perfect. Now that the background has been brought down to our final depth, the next step now is to do the modeling on the leaves. Very straightforward. Each leaf is slightly hollowed out to give it a little bit of depth and a little bit of modeling. The edges are rounded, beveled slightly, and to give a nice smooth surface. The leaf thins out at the tips, at these areas in here. You'll see how I do it. This will cut down a little bit, again, to give a bit of modeling. All right, we'll just start on the top leaf. And start anywhere you want for that matter, and we're just going to start hollowing. I'm using a number 7 gouge just to give it a little bit of depth. You have to watch grain now. Now is the time where you have the potential of, since you're moving, your grain is going to catch. So you're going to have to be very careful and be very aware of that. Now here the leaf starts to come up to full thickness at the top. I switch to a slightly more shallow tool. This is a number 6 to give the final shaping. then the final is to bevel the outside edge and give that a nice sweeping curve. This is where I'm going to give it a little more modeling, bring this edge down, give it the impression of curving slightly. I'm using a number 6 for this. What I do is I will do the almost to the finished modeling on all the leaves. Then I can come back and do the final work all at one time. It gives a more consistency rather than trying to finish one leaf completely, moving on to the next one. To show some more modeling, to show where the large leaf is essentially the primary leaf, I'm going to make a little stop cut through here to lower the level of these leaves. It'll give just a little more modeling, and I'm going to use a V-tool to do that. Just follow our guideline. Here's one. Here's another. Take it easy here because you're going to be going across the grain or up into the grain, and it can give you problems if you're not careful. Sharp tools, that's the important thing here. You can start a little more of the modeling. Now we bring that one down. And this one. What I mean by modeling is the shaping, the curves, the depth, the carving, which is to make it look three-dimensional. It isn't so much the outlining. Outlining is just outlining. But the modeling is when you start giving it a three-dimensional effect, as we're doing right now. We're starting to get this depth, the curves, just a little at a time. Work your way down, depending upon the wood. If it's soft and your tools are as sharp as they should be, sometimes this can be done literally with one cut. But generally, you tease it down to get it to the shape you want. The nice thing about this is free-form. So if you should have a little problem, a little piece of chip, you can always just carve that down. You're not following an exact pattern as you would if you were doing a reproduction or a restoration. Now we have these done. Now I'm going to sharpen up this area right in here. Start with a V-tool so that I maintain that correct shape. Then I will come back with a fairly shallow gouge and blend that, because that leaf visually is to go underneath the larger leaf. I can define that cut very sharply now. Here I'm using a number 3 gouge to give a nice sharp division, so that it does have the effect of going underneath that leaf. All right, the next element to work on is the scroll here at the very tip. First, I like to get the outside modeling. You can really start anywhere you want. Here you have to pay close attention to the grain again. Because if you don't, it will tell you you've done wrong. Now we've got a little of the rounding. Again, this modeling we're doing now is just the coarse modeling. Then we will go back over the entire carving to get the final shape that we want. Blend these in. Now this area right in here is what gives people some trouble, but it's just a matter of a couple of stop cuts. Start in here, make your initial stop cut, down at a slight angle, not straight down in, but at a slight angle in toward the open area. Then come back, generally with a less curved tool, a little shallower tool, and swing down in, work your tool around, and there it is. Come back with the first tool, clean that piece out, and occasionally it takes perhaps a couple of cuts to get this curve just the way you want it. Now you have it. Now it's a matter of just doing the final blending. Before you do that final finishing, a sharp tool is essential. So be sure they're sharp, a bit of stropping before you start, both inside and outside of the tool, and you should be ready. Now it's a matter of just lightly tooling the surface, getting the curves flowing. These inside curves. The reason I like to do this all at one time is that if you do one leaf completed and then work your way through the carving, it may be that your technique will improve as you move through the carving. You're getting a little more practice, so that the first leaf won't be as nice as the last one. So this way, you've roughed them out, you've got everything you wanted, you're just tooling the surface, putting the little embellishments, and there will be a consistency to your carving. It won't look like it was done by different people over a period of different times. There's no harm in sanding. You'll get a nice sanded finish. Again, it's a matter of preference. I like the tooled surface, showing all the tool marks, but consistently. Now is the time to get sharp corners, good definition. Now that all the modeling and the finishing and the tooling of the surface is done, you might want to go around some of the little details with a small riffler file. These are obtainable in woodworking and industrial supply stores, and it just helps to, it's almost the equivalent of sanding down in corners. It just will help you to get any little fuzz out. Just touch up down the bottom of V grooves. Just helps to blend everything together. And then the final step is to put in the veins that you see here. They're just little V cuts to give a little more texture and a little more movement to the carving. Lay it out with a pencil first. Don't try to freehand these, because inevitably you're going to put one where you don't want. You want to see it done with a pencil first. And I'm using a fairly narrow little V, and I just come up the line. If the wood is hard, you can use your mallet. Mallet is a a very precise tool. You don't always have to trust your hand. Once you get used to them, you can do very, very precise work. I believe much more precisely than you can by pushing it with your hand, because the hand slips. This you can control the length of the cut. So that completes the carving. The one here has been finished. The other one has not been finished. But if you're going to do these for the armoire, obviously you're going to have a right and a left-handed version. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to send us emails about your projects. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions of topics you'd like us to cover, we'd be glad to consider them. Thanks again. I'm Dave Reilly for Woodworking at Home.
I sincerely hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you truly enjoyed it, please help us share this information with the rest of the communities. Please hit the subscribe button, give us a big thumbs up, and be sure to tell your friends about this channel. Thanks again for watching.